Hello, I'm Olivia Mattis, welcoming you today on behalf of the Sousa Mendez Foundation to another one of our Sunday programs on the subject of rescue, resistance, and hope. We've been doing these programs for 6 years now, since the beginning of the pandemic. At first, we were doing them on a weekly basis every Sunday. Now we're doing them about twice a month. And today's program is one of the most personal for me that we've done in those 6 years. And we're going to show you an image now to show you why it's personal to me. On the left is my grandmother, Fela Perelman. She was one of the leaders of the Jewish resistance in Belgium. She was one of the founders with my grandfather of the Jewish Defense Committee in Brussels. Her sister, Paula Chabańska, was a partisan who died somewhere on the Polish-Russian border. We don't know where. Obviously, I never knew her, but today is my opportunity to remember her. So I'm grateful to our wonderful panel. I will let our moderator introduce our panel. Our moderator today is Dr. Judd Newborn. He was the founding curator of the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York. He's one of the world's leading authorities on resistance during the Holocaust. And I'm so delighted that he agreed to moderate today's program. He is going to set the context for our discussion and for the film. He's going to put the film you saw in a wider context. And he then will introduce our two featured speakers, Dorothy Boyarski Halperin and Julia Mintz. So right now, Judd Newborn, please take it away.
Thanks, Olivia, and a warm welcome to you all. Olivia, though, what you said about your relatives is so pertinent to today, and it moves me greatly because I've just rewatched the wonderful film that we'll be working with, and that around which this program is going to be shaped. And it's deeply profound. It's one of the best films I have ever seen on the subject matter of resistance, and indeed among Holocaust documentaries, of which there are many. So we've learned a great deal over the last decades about Jews who resisted during the Holocaust, overcoming obstacles that were unique among all others who lived under Nazi domination. Today, we'll provide wider comments as we focus in on the special stories and challenges that Jewish women partisans faced, especially in Eastern Europe. Our special guests today are Julia Mintz, the director of this profound and moving documentary, Four Winters, and Dorothy Boyarski, the proud daughter of one of the most famous of partisans, Gertrude Boyarski. I'll introduce them properly when I finish my context-setting comments. So, first, let's define in general what a partisan is. A partisan is a member of an organized body of fighters, often called guerrillas, you've heard that term, who harass and attack the enemy, especially within occupied territories. Simple? No, for some, but not for us, since the term meant much more for Jewish partisans, especially those of Eastern Europe. As the late TV star Ed Asner, a cousin of a partisan, aptly said, Jews faced a war on three fronts. Asner pointed out that while non-Jewish partisans fought a guerrilla conventional war against a single enemy, Jewish partisans had to battle three separate hostile forces simultaneously. The first front was the Nazi occupiers, with whom Jews engaged in direct combat, as well as by sabotaging supply lines and blowing up German trains and bridges, among many daring actions. The second front consisted of hostile and collaborative local populations, especially in Eastern Europe, who were mercenary and eager to betray hiding Jews, or offering them no food or supplies, even though they were generous with non-Jewish partisan units. And the third front was the anti-Semitism of non-Jewish partisans, who routinely treated them as inferiors or presumed cowards, seizing their weapons or providing none, and even murdering them outright. This would be done by Soviet or Polish or nationalist partisan units that supposedly shared the same main enemy. So because of this triple threat, Jews formed all Jewish partisan units, like the famous Bielski Brigade, depicted in the landmark feature film Defiance of 2009, starring Daniel Craig and directed by Edward Zwick. But Jewish women partisans also faced challenges above and beyond this, often pressured, probably far more than we know, to trade sex, for example, with male commanders of other units for protection. And of course, they always faced the constant threat of rape. Women also suffered disproportionately from the lack of basic hygiene, untreated infections, plus the physical toll of menstruation and pregnancy. Imagine going through all that while frequently moving from forest through the forest, from dugout to dugout, whether in summer or freezing winter. Finally, after the war, they faced being stigmatized for the means they may have been used to endure and keep on fighting, although that does not mean that all women used their bodies for that purpose, and some did not at all, as we'll see in the movie. And sometimes their roles were simply ignored. So, as we see from this map, there were far more undergrounds and revolts than just the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, supported by mostly female couriers who would go from ghetto to ghetto, smuggling in news, forged papers, etc., because men could be easily recognized because of circumcision. So they could fit into a broader definition of partisans, though our focus will be mostly on those fighting in Western Europe, and especially in the forests and marshes of Eastern Europe, the heart of Jewish life on the continent. Now, even before we get to partisans, let's just see a photo of women in the Warsaw Ghetto in the full-fledged military battle fought between Jewish insurgents and the German army itself. Look at the dignity and courage they show, heads held high, while refusing to face the Nazi camera and its propaganda lens. SS Major General Jürgen Stroop, in charge of putting down the revolt, singled out the women with a twisted sense of awe, calling them as nimble as circus performers, but also devils and fiends who fired pistols simultaneously with both hands or looked timid when captured, only suddenly to pull out hidden hand grenades and throw them at the Germans, showering them with curses. Now, resistance by partisans started first in Western Europe. Each time the Nazis invaded a country, Jews joined general resistance groups, but sometimes they formed their own, for example, the Armée Juive in France. In Italy, 14 of the 20 partisan units operating were named after Jewish commanders. The great author Primo Levi was a partisan before being captured and sent to Auschwitz, the only concentration camp ever to be liberated anywhere in Europe, named Cervigliano, was captured by Commander Chaim Vito Volterra and his Monte San Martino unit. As for women in Italy, we have the extraordinary example of Rita Rossani. She left her parents in safety to lead the partisan squad known as the Eagle. Surrounded by an overwhelming force of fascist troops atop a mountain ridge, Rossani refused to surrender and was the last to retreat, fighting fiercely so others could escape. Wounded on the battlefield, she was captured and shot in the head at point-blank range by a fascist lieutenant. The day was Rosh Hashanah, 1944. She was only 23 years old. Rita Rossani was the only woman in the Italian resistance known to have been killed in active combat, posthumously awarded the Italian Gold Medal for military valor. Today, she is highly honored, including a memorial stone dedicated to her atop Mount Comun, where she fell in battle. Now, for Eastern Europe, there were as many as 25 to 30,000 Jewish partisans in Eastern Europe, well out of the proportion to their population, hiding out in forests and marshes, as seen on the map, while carrying out daring attacks. Meanwhile, unlike non-Jewish units, having to force hostile local peasants to give up essential weapons, supplies, and food, as we see in Julia's film. Here is the wonderful Chaya Palevsky, whom I knew and loved. A modest woman in the Vilna ghetto, she was forced to sort through clothing that came in regularly. When her sister Rachel was supposedly shipped out for resettlement, Chaya gave her a pretty white blouse on which she had embroidered colorful little flowers. Not long after, she found that same blouse in a pile of clothing that had been returned to Vilna. And now she knew her sister had been murdered. That very night, Chaya put on that blouse herself and escaped to join partisans in the forest. And when that blouse got torn, she mended it with parachute silk. And when it became dirty, she scrubbed it in the white ashes of their campfires. No matter how hard it was to survive in the forest, she told me, at least we were free of that stinking ghetto. Another famous partisan was the extraordinarily determined and high-spirited photographer Faye Schulman, who managed to retrieve her hidden camera and tripod from the ghetto where she had stashed it before escaping. I want people to know that there was resistance, she said after the war. I have pictures. I have proof. Finally, let's broaden our scope a bit to focus on the young Jews in Palestine who were dropped by the British and as volunteers behind enemy lines throughout Europe. Now, although at least 200 volunteered, the British refused to commit resources to more than 32, instructing them to prioritize British military objectives, not Jewish ones. Hannah Senesh, who parachuted into occupied Yugoslavia in 1944, is the most famous. Just before crossing the border into her native Hungary, German forces occupied the country, thereby making her mission far more dangerous. She crossed nonetheless, only to be captured by Hungarian gendarmes who discovered her British radio transmitter and tortured her for months for the codes to intercept Allied communications, even threatening to kill her mother. But Hannah Senesh never broke. She even refused a blindfold when facing a firing squad, choosing to look her executioners straight in the eyes. Today, her wartime poem, Blessed is the Match, remains a legendary symbol of courage. Resistance by Jews was self-affirming, giving them a deep sense of agency and pride. But let's remember that armed resistance was an opportunity open only to the few and the young. Most Jews across Europe and North Africa managed to maintain their humanity and Jewish identity through spiritual resistance. In 1943, the young poet Hirsch Glick, trapped in the Vilna ghetto, learned of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and wrote what became the anthem of the Jewish partisans, Sag nit kein Mal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, or never say you were on your last road. This anthem heightened their morale, as well as others, as its verses managed to spread. Today, it is often sung at Holocaust memorials around the globe. Its last words are of determination. Despite everything, wir sind da. We are here. Now, I'd like to introduce our two very special guests today. Julia Mintz is an award-winning filmmaker focusing on narratives of bravery and resistance against unimaginable odds. She has been on teams producing films which have been shortlisted for Oscars and premiered at major festivals, winning Emmys and other awards. And you can stream her films, and you should do so, on most major networks, from HBO and American Masters to Netflix and Amazon. Our other honored guest is Dorothy Boyarski Halperin, the daughter of partisan hero Gertrude Boyarski herself, whose story is highlighted in the documentary you've seen or will see by tomorrow night. Don't miss it. Dorothy grew up in Brooklyn with her Holocaust survivor parents and graduated from Queens College. After working in the garment industry, she later started with her husband an independent bicycle manufacturer's representative company. She is proud to share her mother's heroic story of resistance and survival. And now, let's watch a clip from the documentary, 4 Winters, and then Dorothy Boyarski will speak.
Lithuanians with big dogs, they caught up to us and they said, Hände hoch. We picked up our hand and that we didn't stand up, we were on our knees. And who caught up to me? A boy that was with me in school. That was my partner at the prom, a dancing partner. And I called him by name. We went to school together. You were my dancing partner. And I said, let me leave. He said, you're a Jew and you have to die. All the bullets I felt come around me. And then I had a bottle of honey on my coat. and a good pair of boots. I figure if he's going to go for that, he'll see that I'm alive. They had no time either. They were afraid of the partisans. So he put out the disc of bullets, and they ran. That was the first night of my life. I was all alone in the woods. The sky was blue, snow was white. And I was going to my brother, little brother. He was still alive. He was mourning. And my sister was dead, and my mother was dead. And I said, Abraham, you going to go with me to the group? And he said, he was a very smart little boy, and he was 8 years old. And he said, look where Mommy is. Mommy's not alive, and I'm not going to want to be alive. I don't want to be alive. He was shot in the head and the back. He said, no, you go, you save yourself. You go, you save yourself. Get me snow, get me snow. I gave him snow, and he pulled himself up from my hand, and he fell in the snow and he died. That was the end. And I was walking in the snow. I had to walk a whole day in order to get to the gathering point. And when I came to the group, my father was in the group, and I ran to him.
Oh my. Oh my. Dorothy, that is very powerful testimony from your mother. So now let's hear from you, Dorothy Boyarski.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dorothy Boyarski Halperin, and the clip you just saw was of my mom's worst day of her life. Now I'll introduce you to my mom's family. That's the family that my mother was in direction Poland. My mother is to the far left, Gutka. She was then eventually known as Gertrude and Gertie. Her father next to her, and next to him is her mother, Devora, who I'm named after, and then her three siblings and her grandmother in the center. In 1941, my mother's father heard about the invasion of their town, so the family escaped to the woods. This is a picture of direction Poland before the war. You can see the homes. Next. This is the direction synagogue or shul, as we called it. My mother's family was religious, so they would go to shul on Shabbos and the high holy days. Next. This is Dr. Atlas. He was the first partisan. He created the first partisan group with direction fighters, and that group was stationary. It did not move from place to place. Whereas my mom's group was headed by Commandant Bulak, and that group would move from the woods, from place to place, never stationary, never being in one place at one time. My mother at that time wanted to join the partisan, which was difficult for women. And she went to Commandant Bullock and told him that. And he said, well, I'll put you on guard for 2 weeks and we'll see what'll happen. And after the 2 weeks, he said, you proved yourself. You can be a fighter. Obviously, this is a map of where direction was and my mother's partisan group within that red square. Next. This was a medal that my mom received for different missions that she went on. She would go into towns and get food. She'd get chickens and eggs and bring them to the group so that they would have something to eat. But her greatest mission is the burning of the German bridge. You'll see her clip later in the program. Next. This is Bari DP camp, where my parents went. When they first got there, it was not buildings, they were tents. After she found my father, who was a distant cousin, they made their way from Poland to this DP camp. Originally, they lived in tents, which I had just said, and then the buildings were constructed. They lived in Bari for 4 years. Next. This is a photo of my parents when they got married, my handsome father and my beautiful mother. While they were in Bari, they my mother did, felt very comfortable because she knew my father's family. As a young girl, she visited my father's family, and there was a comfort in knowing that she knew his family. Now let me tell you about them coming to America. Okay. When they started to decide to come to America, a close friend of my father told him, if you go to Israel, you're coming to me as a brother. But if you can go to America, go to America. In 1949, they were sponsored by a relative to come to America, which they found through the Red Cross. They lived in the Lower East Side, New York City, moved to Brooklyn. My mom worked as a seamstress and a tailor, and they had a decent life. They went to Monticello in the summers. They wintered in Florida. And when they retired, they moved to Florida in 1987. My mother was affiliated with FAU, which is Florida Atlantic University, with their Holocaust studies. She spoke in numerous schools telling her story. The quilt that you see here was made for my mom from the teachers and the students that wanted to show how much they loved her and her bravery that she had. Next. This was Temple Israel in West Palm Beach, which was Remembrance Day. And she was featured as the guest speaker in 2006. And she did a wonderful job, as she always did. She spoke about her partisan experience. Next. Here's a photo where she was honored by Israeli Bonds event in West Palm Beach, Florida. And you can see she's standing and speaking. I'm there on her right, the rabbi is there, and other members of the temple. She raised more money at that breakfast meeting than all the breakfasts that were done that particular day. And that was her way of doing things. She was always number one. Next. Excuse me. This is a photo of me and my mom that was taken in New Jersey. We were very close. We spoke daily. She was always fearful that something could happen to me after all that she had lost during the war. So she became very overprotective. No bike riding, no skating, no ice skating. I just had to be sure I did the right things at the right times. She taught me to love, understand, not to judge people, and stand up for your beliefs. She did 3 hours of the Spielberg tapes, interviewed with Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation in San Francisco. She spoke 7 languages, Yiddish, Polish, Russian, German, Hebrew, and of course, English. So I am the woman I am today because of her. The following now is the clip of the burning bridge when she earned the Order of Lenin medal.
It was a holiday, like here Mother's Day, Father's Day. They have Women's Day. So what could we do Women's Day for the country? To kill a few Germans. So there was a little bridge, a wooden bridge, that the Germans used to patrol during the day. So that bridge has to be burned. My friend, she should rest in peace. She was also a very tough girl. And she said, right away, I volunteer. And I said, I'm with you. And the commander said, okay. And they sent the commander with us to see if we're not chickening out. We went into that village. We asked for kerosene and straw. They start crossing themselves, we haven't got. We said we need in 5 minutes kerosene and straw. If we don't have it, we'll kill the whole village. In 5 minutes we had kerosene and straw. Everybody's afraid of a gun, of a rifle. We put a fire under the bridge. The Germans saw it. They put a fire on us. But we didn't chicken out, we didn't run away. We were waiting that until that last piece of wood was burning. With our hands, we grabbed the blocks of wood in order to make it faster.
Wow. Dorothy, that was extraordinary. Your comments were beautiful. I can see why you were proud of your mother, and I know your mother has left you a legacy, as well as one for all of us. And now I'm going to bring on Julia Mintz. She is the phenomenal director of this very important film. I must say, we showed it at the Cinema Arts Center on Long Island, where I bring in celebrities and do programs. People were blown away by it. Why wouldn't they have been? And now I'm so glad that I've had a chance to see it again. And Julia, please tell us a little bit and say hello, and I'll ask you some questions.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here. Dorothy, it's so lovely to be here with you, especially. We haven't had that opportunity. And I loved your presentation and the parts of the backstory about what you shared with your mom and Judd. What a beautiful introduction about the larger scope of what the resistance looked like and felt like in many ways across Europe and women's roles. Before the show, Olivia, the way you run this program is really phenomenal. Hats off. One of the questions that Olivia said to me right out was, you know, the choice that I had made to feature women's stories, not just in equal relationship to men, but they were represented in the film. You know, we had 5 women's stories and 3 men, actually, at the end of the day. I interviewed dozens of people, but at the end of the day, when it all shook out, that's where we landed. And both as a woman and as someone who's worked for decades now in making films and historic documentary films, it's always really important to me that women's voices, women's stories are presented, because I think our stories are often marginalized when our roles are actually far from marginal. And so I really welcome and celebrate the opportunities where I get to show that. And so one of the things that I love about Four Winters is that we really get to see women as they were in the resistance. And as Judd said in the introduction, there were a lot of different ways in which women had to survive in the forest. But the magnificent strength and self-determination of the women was actually magnified, in my view, because they were women. You know, not only did they do so much of what the men did, but on the backside of that, they had to also go into the forest knowing what they were up against. And so these stories are really about ordinary, genteel people who ultimately had to find so much courage and so much internal resource, like a moral bravery, moral courage within themselves to stand up and fight back. And at this moment in time, historically, I think for many of us that are concerned about the state of the world, this film has such a powerful reminder, not just to all of us women, but to all the men out there too, that we are so much stronger and so much more resilient than we can possibly understand. And there's one quote that I love from Luba, who's in the film. And I asked Luba, you know, were you always, how could you have been so brave? Were you always so brave? And she said to me, courage, it grows in you, the braveness, it grows into you. I'm not brave. I am not brave. And it was so magnificent because she was so humble and genteel, and yet she found her courage and she found that bravery. And I love that because I think it can grow in each of us. And I need to believe that that's fully possible. You know, I'd love to show the trailer if we can, just to give us a little bit more scope of the film. I think you guys have that on deck. It's just about 1.5 minutes.
They were hunting Jews to capture us and kill us.
They killed my child and my parents.
I was 17 years.
We were Jewish boys and girls fighting against the Nazis. I managed to escape with my camera into the woods.
We were part of a network of sabotage acts.
There were groups living in hundreds of miles of wild territory.
The pillow was the rifle, the walls were the trees, and the sky was the roof.
I have to behave not as a woman, I have to behave as a soldier.
When your life is depending on it, you learn everything quickly.
Derail a train.
It's beautiful to see it, to be part of it.
The braveness, the courage, it grows from you, yes?
We wanted to see Hitler with the Nazis defeated and stay alive.
4 years in the woods. That's 4 winters.
Four winters.
Yeah, 4 years in the woods. That's 4 winters. Yeah. And I love that she gets to carry the title of the film.
Yes. Let me ask you some little technical things. How long did it take you to make the film? Because, you know, you obviously have interviews. I know you use footage that was available from Spielberg and the Partisan Foundation. But did you meet and talk with people like Gertrude and some of the others? I'm sure you must have. And how long did it take? And were you able to talk with people as survivors before they left us, since time has passed?
I interviewed dozens of people, actually, literally dozens, who were actually partisans in the forest and lived there. I also interviewed some people that were children, either in the Bilski Brigade or in other family camps. I interviewed scholars. There was many people that went into ultimately the architecture of the film itself. The experience of interviewing people was truly remarkable. This film, I sort of joke, it was the absolute swiftest film I ever made and took the longest. I worked on this film. It took me actually like a decade, really because of the upside downness of it. Because this film is solely, like you just saw in the trailer and that clip from Gertie, it's knit together only in the partisans' voices themselves. And that's rather untraditional in the making of a historic documentary, let alone a Holocaust documentary. And so when I was pitching the film initially, people thought, good luck with that. Because it really is rare to have a film that's told by people, beyond Octarian, and to be able to create it in a way that's compelling and dynamic. And so it was really difficult to get the funding together. And I just knew in my heart of hearts that this was the final turn. These folks would not be telling their story again. And I knew that there would be more opportunities to tell this story, make films about this with historians, with second gen, with other people coming on board to help illuminate and define it. But this was the final turn. And so I was so deeply committed to that I ended up cutting this film in my home studio in an attic with friends of mine over the years. We'd go out, we'd be shooting other films, then we'd come back and I'd grab the gear and I would do something else and be shooting another movie, and then rent the gear for another couple of days and then go shoot an interview. And it was really remarkable. But, I had the glorious privilege of writing this script, producing it, directing it. And so it went pretty quickly. I mean, I had an incredible team and I trusted my advisors deeply and had scholars vet it. But the actual editing and the assembly of this story and the interviews were really seamless. And so if we count up the actual hours that went into it, it was the fastest film I ever made. But if we count up the years it took to get, raise that money to get those interviews and move through it, it also was actually, I've directed many things over the years and produced lots of work. And but this was the first time that I solely was at the helm in all those capacities. And so I have so much gratitude for the angels that believed in me when there wasn't anything to see, and I said, no, really, I'm going to do this. And they totally got behind me and made this possible. And I'm so grateful. So yeah, so the fastest and the longest, but worth it. And also, you know what, I got to say, there was a blessing in that length because I was a younger filmmaker when I began this project. And by the time I finished it, I had that extra decade under my skin. So a lot more films, a lot more experience, a lot more humility. and yeah, I loved it. I loved every second of it.
This was the right time in your career to make the film, right?
It was definitely the right time to start it and the right time to finish it. We distributed it in this extraordinary way. We've gone global in a way that no other film. I've worked on a lot of fantastic films, and this film has had the broadest reach and the most wonderful groundswell across the United States and around the world of any film I've ever done. And I'm so glad, I know that would have been everyone who participated in this film's wish. I know that was Gertie's wish. They wanted their story to be known, and we're doing it. And it just brings me so much pleasure. And now the Sousa Mendes Foundation has now bringing the film to all of you. And we continue to bring the film out into the world exponentially. And that's pretty magical. And I know each time Gertie and Faye and Luba and Frank and Isidore and Michael Stoll, they're all, I think, smiling down on us now as we continue to bring this story into the future.
Great. So I'm going to take the floor back just for a few minutes to make some announcements. Audience members, this is your chance to continue putting your questions into that chat box. Dr. Judd Newborn will be gathering your questions, and then he will be asking them of our panelists. So right now, let me tell you what we have upcoming here at the Sousa Mendes Foundation. We're taking a little bit of a break in our Sunday programs. Our next program will be on July 26th, so in about 6 weeks. The reason we're taking that break is that I am taking a group of teachers to Portugal for our second annual Educators Institute in Portugal on rescue and resistance. So we honor a hero, a Portuguese hero, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, who was one of the great rescuers. And we're going to be visiting places in Portugal of relevance to his story. And we're going to be hearing from distinguished scholars. So I'm very excited. We have US teachers who will be interfacing with Portuguese teachers, and it's going to be a very special time in the first half of July. So that's why today is our last program in the month of June. I also want to give a special thanks to our intern these past 10 months. Today is his last program. You see him on screen. His name is Robin Biga. And so you can all wave to him. Of course, your cameras aren't on, but he sees you anyway, waving to him. And he has my deepest thanks, as does my colleague, Matthew Spurn, who has been with the Susan Mendes Foundation now for 6 years, and hopefully many more to come. So this summer, we have 3 programs we are bringing to you. On July 26th, our next program, we're featuring this new book that tells the story of Gisela Warburg from the famous Warburg family. She rescued Jewish young people during World War II. She worked with Henrietta Zold. We had a program on her. So we have this program on July 26th. We have 2 programs upcoming in the month of August, August 23rd and August 30th. So on August 23rd, we're showing this fabulous new film called To Kill a Nazi. And it's the unbelievable life story of a Frenchman named Michel Cogeot, who grew up in Lyon, France, where, of course, the Nazis occupied much of France, including Lyon. And the man who was in charge of Lyon, the Nazi, was the infamous Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, so-called. So this man, Cogeot, it was Klaus Barbie who deported his father to Auschwitz. And so when he grew up, Michel, he vowed to take revenge on his father's murder and to track down Klaus Barbie in South America. So it's this unbelievable story of how he tracks down Klaus Barbie with the intent to kill him. And you'll find out in the film what happens. And then just a short while later, Michel Cogeot finds himself on an Air France flight that happens to be the very flight that gets hijacked to Entebbe, Uganda. And he becomes one of the heroes of the raid on Entebbe story. So it's an incredible, unique life story that's told in this film. You will not want to miss it. And right now we're going to see a little trailer for the film called To Kill a Nazi.
Ou le hasard ou la destinée a voulu que je me retrouve à bord de cet avion d'Air France.
The plane takes off. And all of a sudden, somebody gets up and screams fire. And then you see 2 people who each have a hand grenade and a gun.
As most of those on board Flight 139 panicked, one passenger remained strangely calm. Michel Cogeot, a French business consultant, harbored deep doubts about a decision he made the previous year. Michel was haunted by his father's disappearance during World War II.
Goldberg is put on a train going towards Auschwitz.
Le père de Michel mort à Auschwitz.
Michel identified the Gestapo officer who arrested his father.
Klaus Barbie, who was nicknamed the Butcher of Lyon, was the head of the Gestapo there.
Je me suis résolu de le rencontrer pour le tuer.
He would practice gun shooting in the backyard.
Et il dit cette phrase qui, moi, m'a beaucoup marquée. Klaus Barbie était là devant moi, je voulais l'assassiner.
C'est là qu'il a changé.
He grabbed the first plane he could find.
Michel flew to Tel Aviv with his 12-year-old son, Olivier.
They announced while we were in the plane that we were going to do a stop in Athens, in Greece.
Athens was known to be a very dangerous place.
The 1970s were the golden age of hijacking.
And our plane was hijacked to Entebbe in Uganda.
Michel viewed the hijacking as his once-in-a-lifetime second chance.
That's at the point at which Poggio steps forward.
Mais je dirais que Entebbe était fait pour des gens comme moi.
The Entebbe episode is a chance for him to do the right thing, but in a positive way. Not taking someone's life, saving someone's life.
The raid of Entebbe is one of the most important special operations of all time. And Cujo was absolutely crucial to its success.
I was so shocked, and I knew this story.
C'était vraiment un extraordinaire clin d'œil de l'histoire.
Okay, so after today's program, you will be getting an email about this program and others and information about how to sign up. So now let's get to your questions. So Dorothy, we want to know more about your family that did survive. Your grandfather, Israel, and did you have an uncle that survived? Tell us about your family.
There was no family that survived. My mother's grandmother had a dozen grandchildren, and they shot all those grandchildren in front of her and then shot her. So there was nobody that was alive. And when we came to this country, the family that we had were all distant family. This one knew that one, then knew that one, and so on and so forth, but no real family. So when my parents came to this country, they knew nothing other than my mother knowing the language and knew several languages, as I had said. And it would have been so appropriate if somebody would have said to her, why don't you go to the UN and become an interpreter? But instead, she was a seamstress, and that actually saved her through the war. She would be sewing.
I see. So you had two parents who were survivors. That must have been quite a heavy weight on your shoulders.
Definitely, because I was brought up very different than all of my friends. And to be honest, my first language was Yiddish. I did not speak English until I was 5 years old. And it came to me at that point when I started speaking English, I would say to my mother, how come I don't have a grandma? Where's my grandpa? How come I don't have an uncle? Because all my friends had that. And slowly she started telling me the stories of what she had gone through.
And how did you come to understand that she was such a hero?
Well, I guess you can tell it from parts of the things that she said in the film. She didn't chicken out. I mean, she starts using the American terminology. And, you know, when her friends said they're going to volunteer to blow up this bridge, she said, I'm with you all the way. So there was something in her. She said it was always like where she felt as though she felt there was nothing to live for after all of her family was killed. She said, but it's very strange that the survival to live is very, very strong. And obviously it was, because she found that bravery and she survived.
Julia, you mentioned that you interviewed a lot more partisan fighters than just the ones who are featured in the final cut of the film. Is that additional footage available somewhere for viewing?
We're actually doing all sorts of things with the archive. And I'm also in the beginning of making another film. So some of that material will be integrated, I'm sure, into our next film. And the archive itself is part of our work that's in front of us. At this time, no, it's still part of New Moon Films and the different projects that we're doing. But we're also writing a book. So all the transcripts eventually will be compiled and available in that way.
That's fantastic. Now, numerous people are asking how to view the film outside of the 4-day window you've granted us. So how does one see your film, this film?
Thank you for asking. Well, if you are part of a community of people At this point, even a book group. We try to do a limited, like at least 18 people. We're still very much committed to the film being seen in community and live sort of streaming events. We made a very special exception for the Sousa Mendes Foundation to make it available for this event. And you all have Olivia to thank because she was very, very persistent with us to make it available to you all for this special window. But in your own communities, a temple, a synagogue, a school, college campus, we are totally working with all different communities and individuals to bring the films to their communities, to their cinemas, and you can get a whole lot more information about that. But it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Go to our website, fourwintersfilm.com, and email us. Tell us a little bit about your community and what you'd like to do. And I have a wonderful team that will make arrangements to arrange a license and a modest screening fee for your collective different environments. And right now, that's how to see it. It won't be released streaming on traditional pay-per-view platforms, probably for quite some time. We may run in the spring, you know, for certain holidays. If you follow us on Facebook, it's a Four Winters WW2, or you can follow me, Julia Mintz. We do occasionally for a special event with a partner, we might do a special streaming event and then maybe a talk back or something like that. So you can keep your eye out. But it's great that you're interested and we want you to see it too. So please reach out to us through our website, fourwintersfilm.com, and let us know how we can work with you to bring it to your community.
Julia, where did you get the footage of the missions, the explosions, the groups in the forest? How did you get that?
Yeah, the archival footage, it was really wonderful. The Stephen Smith, who was one of the guys in charge, really the head of the Shoah Foundation's archive, and Jewish Story Partners, which was one of the organizations that we had a wonderful grant from in the end to rescore and do the music and sound. And they really were so happy with the archival footage. It's been touted as one of the most significant comprehensive collections of partisan footage that there is in the world, actually. As Judd mentioned earlier, there were partisan units in all over, really, and different brigades like your aunts and others. But this is really the footage of Eastern Europe. You know, that was the region where our partisans were. And so it's pretty comprehensive. We were in Lithuania, we were in Belarus, we were in Poland. We went to all these little tiny places, archives, museums. Many of the partisans that we interviewed and their families had footage, personal photos, things that they had collected over time. I don't think there was a rock we didn't unturn. All over the United States, Israel, we mined everywhere. And it is exciting because there's still occasionally like a photograph or something that I see that isn't included in the film, but it was really an extraordinary journey, mining all the different archives around the world and choosing the right images that really kept you within the frame. And of course, Faye Schulman, you know, who's featured in the film, and her archive to us for use.
Wonderful. So I'm going to take that as your final remarks. And Dorothy, what would you like to say today in closing to our audience?
Okay, what I would like to say is I want to thank you, Olivia, and your incredible staff at Sousa Mendes Foundation for putting this together for a great tribute. A very special thank you to you, Julia, for your years of work in getting this documentary, Four Winters, for the world to see and never forget what the partisans did. My mom would always ask, why me? Why did I live to survive? I guess to be a witness and tell her story, and she did. And as she would say in her own dialect of Yiddish, she'd say, if you want to know more about me, Google me. There's plenty on me. Google me. So if you want to know more about Gertrude Boyarski, Just Google her.
Great. Judd, the last word goes to you. What would you like to say in closing today to our audience?
I would like to say that this film tells us a story we might never have learned if partisans and others who resisted had not insisted, despite being dismissed, men and women, that their stories had to be told. So Julia and Dorothy have done something important for us and for all humankind, a great service, because it is now our responsibility to keep these stories alive, be alert for other stories that may not have surfaced yet, and I can tell you already there are others, and never allow the forces today, whether it is anything happening in current events or anti-Semitism, to keep us from speaking up and speaking out and telling all of our stories as loudly and strongly as necessary.
Great. Well, the hour has flown by. I want to thank our three fabulous guests, including our moderator, JUD NEWBORN, and Dorothy Boyarski Halperin, brilliant filmmaker, Julia Mintz. Thank you, our wonderful audience who comes week after week. We now have a 6-week hiatus, so we hope to see you for our free program on July 26th. And be well. Have a nice summer. See you in July. Take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.